Week 5, day 2. How'd you do yesterday with your goals? You give yourself a plus, you give yourself a minus. Remember now, when you're writing these goals, if you do give yourself a minus, don't beat yourself up. Nobody's perfect. But if you don't have a plan for it, don't forget that vision without a plan is a dream. So if you don't have a plan and you're not committed to doing the goals, you're never going to do them. A goal is simply a vision with a plan. You got to have a plan. You got to have a vision, no matter how simple it is, and you got to have a plan to do it with. We're going to talk about humility this week. And this is the best speech I ever heard on humility. And maybe it was because it was a personal thing. I was coaching in Marshall, Texas, and George Foreman lived in Marshall, Texas. If you don't know who George Foreman is, George Foreman was the heavyweight champion, boxing champion of the world. And he was the heavyweight boxing champion of the world twice. The first time he was the heavyweight champion of the world, he lost his title in Africa to Muhammad Ali after he had beaten Joe Frazier. Well, when I was coaching in Marshall, George Foreman was going through retirement. Now, he came out of retirement and won the championship again. But George Foreman came and talked to my football team one year, and he gave the best speech on humility that I've ever heard. And George came in, and of course, here's this mountain of a man, George Foreman, and every kid in there knows exactly who George Foreman is at this time. And George comes in and he says, humility is the first step to greatness. You can either humble yourself or you can become humiliated. You will either humble yourself or you will be humiliated. He said, let me tell you a great example. He said, when I was getting ready to fight Joe Frazier for the heavyweight championship of the world, I was scared to death. Joe Frazier was the meanest man on the planet, and I was just scared to death of Joe Frazier. I worked out every day. I ate exactly the right food. I didn't have an entourage. It was me and my trainer and my sparring partners, and that was it. And we lived in isolation. There wasn't any women there. There wasn't any parties. There wasn't any bad food. And he said, I trained like a Trojan for that fight. I knocked Frazier out, became the heavyweight champion of the world. Now, you cannot imagine how many friends the heavyweight champion of the world has. But all of a sudden, I've got all of these friends. And then I signed to fight this old retired champion in Africa, Muhammad Ali. And so I start my same workout regimen. I'm going to the gym. And all of my friends are saying, George, you don't need to go to the gym. You're the greatest. I said, okay, I'll take a day off. And so I'd get up in the morning to go do my road work, and they'd say, George, don't get up so early. You don't need to do road work. You're the greatest. I went to Africa, fought Ali, and I passed out from exhaustion in the 8th round. Now, it'll be written as Ali knocked me out in the 8th round and his rope-a-dope and all that. The truth of it was he knew I was not in shape. And so he sat on the ropes and let me swing and swing and swing until I just completely passed out from exhaustion. When I fought Joe Frazier, I was humble. I had humility. When I fought Muhammad Ali, I had no humility. I thought I was the greatest, and I got humiliated. Now, Ali would never fight me again. There was never a rematch. Well, George Foreman went on at that time, and he was on my back porch one day, and he said, Coach, I'm going to be the heavyweight champion of the world. And George weighed about 300 and something pounds at that time. And I said, okay. He said, you don't believe me? I said, no, I don't. He said, if you saw me running 10 miles when you go on your way to work in the morning, if you saw me running to Wendy's, would you believe me then? I said, yeah, I would. George Foreman had a goal, and his goal was to be the heavyweight champion of the world again. Now, he had a plan with it. He had all that road work that he did every morning, running all the way to Wendy's, and that was 10 miles. And then he sparred. Now, the way he sparred, he had different weight classes as sparring partners. He had a featherweight that he couldn't hardly catch or hit. And he would go 2 rounds with him, and then a lightweight, then a middleweight, then a light heavyweight, then a heavyweight at the end. And so at that 10th round, he was fighting a heavyweight after 9 rounds of chasing these other guys. Humility. There wasn't anybody down there in that training except him and his trainer. There wasn't any parties, there wasn't any bad food. He had a vision and he had a plan and he had humility. He was humble. He knocked Michael Moore out and won the heavyweight championship of the world the second time. He wore the same trunks in that fight that he had worn when he fought Ali. George Foreman is truly a great man, a great person. But he gave the best speech on humility. And he told our players, he said, you guys are really good. Matter of fact, you went to the quarterfinals this year. And this summer, Coach Parker is going to tell you that you need to work out. And you're going to say, Coach, we don't need to work out. We're the Mavericks. We're better than anybody. We beat Longview 35-0. We don't need to work out. And you're going to get humiliated. Or you can be humble and work out like you did to get to the quarterfinals. And you can be great. I promise you, watching those kids that summer come up and work out, they still remembered George Foreman. They remembered that speech. You have 2 choices. You either be humble or you're going to be humiliated. What's your choice? Humility or humiliation? That's your choice. Be humble or be humiliated. Humility allows us to do what? Churchill said, become great. As George Foreman says, you can't be great unless you're first humble. You have to be humble before you're great. Humility before greatness. See you tomorrow.